Well, in council, it was in the 60s, and a fella had resigned from council, a Republican member, because he had moved out of the village. So they called me up and asked me would I like to be appointed. And like I say, I knew all the politicians because we were involved with them. So I accepted the appointment, and I think I finished out the last couple of years under the appointment job. And then I ran for election and won, believe it or not, by only 20 votes. I always say election is the guy that the most people know.
Right.
You know, it's you could be an idiot actually in some of these places. That's why I always thought, and get elected. See, not that any of them were idiots, but it's the way I look at it. It was like showbiz, you know. So it means I'm working in the station. Everybody in the world knew me because we were the only station in town. We had the only restroom in town, and it was much smaller than the Green Hills. And so when you ran for something, everybody knew you, see. And say, well, vote for him. So that's the way I ended up. The biggest thing that came up was cable. All these cable companies were vying for the job of having the cable in Green Hills, Forest Park, and part of Springdale. So I happened to be on the committee to pick a cable company. And there was 5, 6, 7 of them, maybe more, sending in letters and coming to our meetings, our committee meetings, and giving us their spiel and so forth. And it eventually ended up, after many meetings and a lot of aggravation, we picked Warner Cable. And that's how Warner ended up. But it could have been one of many different companies. Gay, my daughter, went to OLR through grade school. She was older than my son, I think 6 years older. And she went on to Green Hills High School. And in the interim, she taught ballet dancing. In fact, in our basement, the ballet bars are still up, where she taught beginners and medium dancers ballet. And Mark went through Our Lady of Rosary, and then he went through St. X High School for his high school days. And Gay graduated from, I say, Green Hills High School. When we first moved here, Green Hills Drugstore still had an old soda fountain. And that's long gone. Can't remember, but I think from IGA up towards the service station was nothing. I remember. And the drugstore was owned by the group, I can't think what they called it now. They owned the grocery store, co-op. That's what it was. They owned the grocery store and the drugstore, which was a co-op. So if you bought in either one of these places and you saved your sales receipts, at the end of the year you turned them in and you got a kickback of so much, because really the co-op belonged to the people of Green Hills. Then they kept adding on to the shopping center. In fact, where the bank stands now was a big hill where we used to park our Jeep because they had a bad starter, and we'd roll down the hill. And where Johnny's Toys is now was a beautiful field of all flowering crabapple trees. And people just had a fit when they tore that up. We participated in the turkey raffles. And in fact, the turkey raffles before the Legion Hall was built were held in the basement of the service station. And in fact, that was the social place for Green Hills. Like I say, there was a different spirit in the village years back. I think it's because everybody knew everybody. Everybody belonged to something, whichever party or whichever organization. And being I had worked in the station, I knew everybody. And that's in the days when they didn't even have electronic vote counters. I remember 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be running down the Board of Elections with sacks of ballots. My daughter was in grade school, probably the first grade, and it was Arbor Day, and they gave them all a little dead little seedling of a tree, and I took it and planted it, and there you see it. So I'd say 35 years and more, it grew to this. And then this tree over here, my son brought home a few years later on Arbor Day, another little stick, and I planted it, and there you see the tree. Now, on account of all the trees around here in the shade, we could not grow grass. So what we decided to do is build rock paths, rock walls, rock gardens, and my wife, Vivian, was the designer, and her and I, believe it or not, dug all this up, carried the rocks, put the rocks in the ground, made the paths. This area here, believe it or not, is the oldest path in the oldest area, and I used to come home from work at 11 o'clock at night, and we'd go out to old Petker's farm, and dig soil and so forth, and lay it in here, and this is the first rock path we built. In fact, this was the first garden. Around there was just grass before the trees. So when you walk on this, you're walking on rocks that have been down for close to 40 years. And we put this fountain in with a reciprocating pump, and it's just an old whiskey barrel with a steel tub, and that pump came off an old farm on Kemper Road, and it was actually in use. And they sold the farm because they're all homes there now, and the guy cut it off and pulled it right out of the ground and sold it to me. These are some of the gardens that Viv designed, and I helped her. Like I say, she's the gardener, and all the stuff you see in here, we planted. It's either perennials or annuals, and all these flowers out here, perennials and annuals. And as you see, we got the Mayor's Award, one of the Mayor's Awards for gardens this year. And here's more flowers and more flowers. We've created a monster.